And welcome back to a fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, as always, John O'Chirumbolo, and this is Chris Sapanis, my co-host and partner in crime. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 offenses that we think are going to have a much better improvement over last year. Whether it be a numerous different number of factors, we'll dive into each one of them. We'll have a couple honorable mentions, a couple that are a little bit obvious to those out there, but we want to dive into a little bit deeper on some teams that people may not know where to draft players on this offense quite yet. So we'll give a little bit more insight in our thoughts on these teams. So let's kick it off. First one is the Cleveland Browns. I still see people besides Nick Chubb down and down on the Cleveland Browns because when you look at the ADP and where people are drafting, they're still being drafted like they were a couple of years ago, even similar to where they were when you had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. And I think we're looking at a Browns team that can make the jump into the next echelon of offenses in terms of scoring offenses. When you have a quarterback that's been a top 5 quarterback in fantasy football in his last 3 full seasons, you've got a premier number 1 wide receiver, you've got a young number 2 wide receiver that comes in, you have an athletic freak of a tight end, and you have one of the best pure running back in NFL, but one of the best running backs overall in NFL and fantasy football, all on one offense, including a solid offensive line, like one of the best in there, especially for running. I think, I didn't name all the names and we'll go through everybody in this offense. I just don't see there being a pathway to not being successful, barring injuries. And obviously we're talking about all these offenses with everybody going to be healthy for the full 17-week season. So what's your favorite part about this offense in the change?
It's the wide receiver core. We can talk about Deshaun Watson getting a full offseason underneath his belt. He came back and he looked just really rusty in the last game, in a couple of games of the season. He took a lot of sacks. He wasn't efficient with the football. The last 3 or 4 games, he started to figure it out. But if you look at the wide receiver room and what they were able to do, and they brought in 2 big guys, all right? They traded for Elijah Moore, and then they drafted Cedric Tillman. And I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about Cedric Tillman. He's kind of forgotten into this, with Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and David Njoku. He's a pass catcher that, they really can let develop this season. I don't think he's going to be early season, jumping off the board like, some of these rookie wide receivers coming into the league. But you let this kid develop, and he's coming into a really good system where he doesn't need to be the guy. He doesn't even need to be the second guy. You have Elijah Moore that's extremely talented, who never reached his full potential in New York because Zach Wilson just could not get him the football, couldn't get anyone the football really. But especially Elijah Moore, and he is one of those guys that needs to get open. I seriously think if he went to the Kansas City Chiefs, he could be a top 10 receiver because that's his kind of he's great at after the snap and kind of that kind of backyard football style play. I've said this all offseason, if Deshaun Watson even returns to 80% of what he is, this offense is going to make a huge leap this year. And this is a top rushing offense in the league. I mean, you can see a top passing offense in the league as well, just based on the weapons that they have around them. I mean, we haven't even talked. I mean, we mentioned David Njoku, but he's a great red zone target, a great pass catching tight end. And when you have elite weapons on the outside, like Amari Cooper, it allows the other receivers to do a whole lot more. And we saw Donovan Peoples-Jones be effective last year. Now imagine adding 2 more receivers to that rotation, that even if there's an injury, they're not going to fall off a cliff because they're not reliant on one guy to be the guy. They have 4 guys that are really top talent. Like you can put this as maybe one of the more talented, maybe a top 10 most talented wide receiver course in the league.
Well, I think they're 100% underrated. I mean, let's talk about Elijah Moore real quick because obviously Garrett Wilson came in last year as a rookie. It's a hard player not to pick in the draft for the Jets, and he proved his worth early and often in the season. And again, we talked about the quarterback struggles that the Jets had. Now, the year before Elijah Moore's rookie season, he was coming out to be one of the touted wide receivers that everybody liked. Even as a Giants fan, I was hoping that possibly the Giants would draft someone like Elijah Moore, a solid, thick-bodied receiver who can play physically and has a good route tree capability. The thing with him is right after that bye week, week 7, he had 6 targets for 1 catch. I mean, it was, again, quarterback struggles. But moving on, 6 for 67, 7 for 84. He had a game against Miami week 11 2 years ago where he had 8 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown. Following game, 4 for 46, and then he had 6 for 77 and a touchdown before an injury took him out for the rest of the season. So you knew he was primed for a good opportunity. The problem was you don't have a quarterback good enough in New York at the time to really make 2 receivers valuable. It was a 1 receiver type of offense.
For 120 yards a game.
Correct. Only a 1 receiver offense at that point. And so to me, Elijah Moore is finally in a position where you look when you had D-Hop and you had Will Fuller going for Deshaun Watson, the 2 guys feasted. Obviously, Elijah Moore's not a streamer and a streaker like Will Fuller was, but still the whole concept of having 2 solid wide receivers, an obvious number 1 and a secondary guy that is capable and very good. And I think that's going to help him out. And really, we got to talk about the biggest thing is that play action for this team is going to be wild because the defenses against them cannot afford to play pass heavy defense and just let Nick Chubb run all over the place because they will be beaten to the ground and tired. We know that. So because he's one of the best running backs, you have play actions, you have RPO opportunities because of the legs of Deshaun Watson as well. And then all these quick little dump offs to Njoku. Njoku is going to create mismatches over the middle now that there's 2 solid receivers there. And again, we talked about Donovan Peoples-Jones is a good receiver. We talked about Tillman. He could work himself into the fold. If it wasn't for his injury last year, he should have been drafted higher. Hyatt last year came in behind him and was still good, and he still was coming into the games and doing something here and there. But to me, Tillman was the guy the year before that proved he was an alpha. He was supposed to be an alpha. It wasn't until his injury that he sidelined him for that. But this receiving core is amazing. Your running back is amazing. You have a tight end that, to me, breaks into the top 10, if not the top 7. My prediction for fantasy, I'd say that's a bold prediction, but top 7 for fantasy with Njoku because pure athleticism and his ability for yards after the catch is like some of the best in the league. I like the Browns offense. I think these are guys you should look for because they're going to be value options on your draft.
Well, that was what I was just going to say is like even Amari Cooper is dropping to like the 4th or the 5th round, and there's number 2 receivers coming off the board on teams before he is, and you look at. So let me ask you: Do you like Amari Cooper or Terry McLaurin better?
I like Amari Cooper better.
Right, but Terry McLaurin's going like a round and a half before Amari Cooper.
Yeah,
which baffles me. It's like, do you like the offense better? Do you like Sam Howell better, or do you like Deshaun Watson better?
Well, here's
I get the hesitation with Deshaun Watson. I really do. With a lot of people out there, they're really hesitant to kind of dive in and fully believe. But again, this is Nick Chubb's team. This offense is going to revolve around Nick Chubb, and Deshaun Watson can manage the game. But he has weapons around him that he doesn't have to manage the game, that he can go out there and duel it out with anyone. And we've seen Deshaun Watson in his career. I mean, not too long ago. I mean, but a year and a half away from football, it takes you some time to get the rust off the wheel.
Well, it's not even just a year and a half. It's a year and a half of scrutiny and coming, back into the public eye to play the game and knowing that the fans and everybody around you, he may not even knew how much of his locker room was really behind him. And that's a tough thing mentally for an athlete, let alone a person. All you listen out there going into your office knowing that everybody on your team in your office is against you in some way or another, or the people in your company don't root for you or rally for you. In fact, they're against you because of something you did or said in an email. You take that home and you're sleeping with that every single night. And that's what he was doing. And it makes it difficult to play. I think he's going to be fresh off of that. He shook it all off. I mean, look, at the end of the game, he did have a 22-point week season, QB3 finish last year at week 17 against Washington. A lot of people did against Washington, but he threw for, or Amari Cooper. Sorry, it was Amari Cooper, wide receiver 3, but he had Amari Cooper had a wide receiver 3 finish with 100-something yards and 2 touchdowns with Deshaun Watson at the helm. So we know he can handle the pressure again. I think he's going to be crisper. I think he's going to have a better rapport with the receivers because we don't forget he wasn't allowed in the building for a long period of time to let alone practice. Right. Like he didn't have an off season like these other guys had. So again, not I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. I just think there was more on his shoulders than just the lack of playing time.
For sure.
I think you take that into account, and the sky's the limit for a guy who was a top 5 finisher every single season prior to that, pretty much.
I can easily make an argument for the Browns being a top 5 offense in the league.
Scoring offense, yeah, I agree with you.
Scoring offense in the league.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
The one thing I'll say is like they have a tough division and a tough defensive division. So, the Ravens every year are going to be good. The Steelers defense is an elite defense, especially getting after the pass rusher. And the Bengals defense isn't a joke. The good thing is that at least with the Bengals and the Ravens, they're going to be in shootouts. And we don't really know that Kenny Pickett can sustain the shootout offense. But at least with the Bengals and the Ravens, like they might be in some shootout games, and we might see Deshaun Watson have to outduel Burrow and Lamar. And those are going to be great games. It's not going to be like the pushover, like smash them in the mouth, kind of run heavy first games that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years from those teams. But yeah, I'm excited about the Browns offense for sure. Like I like Amari Cooper. I've said it throughout the offseason that I like Elijah Moore as kind of like a mid-round receiver. It's crazy. Like Amari Cooper's going like 3 rounds ahead of Elijah Moore. And still, I think that's a value for him. But still, like I would go and grab Donovan Peoples-Jones or take a late flyer on Cedric Tillman just to see if he blows up, especially if you're in a keeper league or a dynasty league. Like who knows what they're going to do with Peoples-Jones, if they're going to renew his contract, and you can have Tillman come in and be a big piece. Well, one thing I'll say about Elijah Moore too is he can run out of every position. They can put him into the slot, they can put him on the outside, and so they have a lot of guys that can do. And you could do the same thing with Amari Cooper. So they're going to be able to do.
Well, and he did in his career already. Exactly. The last thing I'll say here, Nick Chubb's an obvious draft. Like to me, nobody's going to want have the cojones to draft him in the top 3-4 picks. Obviously, that being said, you wouldn't be in a bad spot if you're at that 4-5 pick there, and you obviously saw the top running backs go, and Jefferson go, and Chase maybe go, or something like however you have your rankings, and you want to go for your guy, and to steady Eddie of Nick Chubb is not a bad option. Again, I'm taking a bold take on Njoku, and you're going to get him at deep value. If he finishes in the top 7 tight ends, deep value. To me, Deshaun Watson can finish in the top 7 quarterbacks again. Like he does in his in what we call his prime. He's still a young guy. I think it could be that too. And where he's falling allows you to take so many good players where people are going from Mahomes and Allen. And if he finishes in the top 5, like the top 5 did last year, the point differential between, him and Mahomes may be a little bit more, but him and Allen and him and the other finishers wouldn't be that much. And, the last note here about Deshaun Watson too is you talked about the division being difficult. It's difficult, but you get people like he was an elite passer too. He would only rush for 400 or 500 yards in a season, but he still threw for a ton and a ton of touchdowns. Joe Burrow can throw for a ton of touchdowns and be successful in this division. I think he can too. Lamar Jackson's done it in the division. I think he can too. Everybody's thinking Kenny Pickett's going to, have this big, breakout season, that I've been reading here and there, which I'm not buying. But if everybody's going to think Kenny Pickett's going to have a breakout season, how do you not see Deshaun Watson having a fantastic season then? So that's just my note on that.
I think just the industry as a whole is just having a hard time mentally getting over the hurdle of Deshaun Watson and the stigma around him.
Correct.
Like he's not a bad football player. He's a really good football player. And
people were drafting him in like we were Lamar Jackson. People were drafting him like we were Josh Allen now. Like people were drafting him like Burrow back when he was in his prime. Like if he didn't get that suspension, I would have loved to see what his ADP was in 2021. I guarantee you it would have been in the first 4 rounds. But why are we drafting him in 6th, 7th, 8th round?
Later.
And later, if not later, depending upon where you rank them. So again, look at the Browns. That's a team that you're going to get value at those positions because people are sleeping on them because they're not expecting much, but I expect big things. If, like I said, Deshaun Watson did it with D-Hop and Will Fuller, Elijah Moore and Amari Cooper can benefit off of his quarterback play. So let's move on to another team here. We'll go into the AFC East here, and let's talk about the Patriots. a team that last year surprised everybody with how bad they were. They were great on the run game, obviously. Ramondre Stevenson had a great season, but Mac Jones looked like somebody else. It was like Jekyll and Hyde there. Jacoby Myers got his, obviously, because he was the only one really catching the ball. The tight end duo that we were expecting big things from didn't pan out either, and part of that was a quarterback play. But at the end of the day, was it the quarterback play or was it your offensive coordinator? Because now we've got a brand new one in Bill O'Brien. Yeah, well, lack thereof. Well, Bill O'Brien coming back to the Patriots and where he made his bread and butter, which allowed him going to head coaching afterwards. So Belichick goes to the tried and true of what he knew. And I think it's going to help Mac Jones, and I think we're going to go back to seeing this 2 tight end sets where Gesicki plays a little more of the Rob Gronkowski role this time around. And I think Ramondre Stevenson's going to have a great opportunity again this season. And the question is, where are we going to put in terms of receivers? That's a tough situation. But to me, the needle moves because the offensive coordinator in this situation. It's going to have better play calling, better opportunities, and they're going to scheme teams better overall and let Bill Belichick not have to worry about what he's going to be doing on that offense.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this defense at least be a turnover machine. Like the last 3 years, they've been a top 5 scoring defense in terms of fantasy, based on the turnovers and the touchdowns that they have. So the run game is not something that really concerns me. Even last year, I don't think it concerned me. I think it's going to be better this year. And again, the offense is going to be better based on the weapons that they have and then the person who's calling the plays. You don't have 2 defensive coordinators calling plays on your offense. Yeah. You actually get an offensive coordinator in there who knows this system, that the team knows his system. Mac Jones knows his system. And so I think we're going to see a big jump from last year's numbers. I don't think that they're going to be, a top 5 defense or maybe not even a top 10, but they looked atrocious last year in terms of passing. They couldn't move the football down the field. I think adding Juju, they still have Devontae Parker there. Tyquan Thornton adds a lot of speed. And then, like you said, they have the 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. And I think Gesicki and Hunter Henry are both really, really good pass-catching tight ends. And you have 2 of them on the field, at least in terms of fantasy production. Like, those are 2 tight ends that I would love to have on my team as a secondary option. Like, if I'm running a 2 tight end rotation, one of those guys are what I'm targeting. So if I miss out on Gesicki, like, I'm fine getting Hunter Henry. Like, they're great in the red zone. They were 2 years ago. Hunter Henry was efficient last year in terms of production from the tight end position. But yeah, I think having Juju and a possession receiver like that, if Devontae Parker's healthy, then Devontae Parker should be a solid piece to this team. They're another team that doesn't really have a lot of flash. No. But again, they were effective 2 years ago, and then really only effective in the run game last year. And they didn't have an offensive coordinator. And they're going to have to keep pace with the other teams in this division. They got 6 games against Miami, the Jets, and Buffalo. So they're going to have to keep pace. And at least from a fantasy perspective, you might love some garbage time on this team, especially in those 6 games. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say anything as a Jets fan because I don't even want to talk about our record versus the Patriots or, any Thanksgiving Day games.
Well, you may say something. You may say the wrong thing.
Yeah, don't bring it up. I'm not going to jinx my team. I'm not going to say that they're going to get, it's not going to be 52-0. Thanks, Patriots. Just keep running up the score, guys. But we've seen really good offenses from this team before, and I think Mac Jones can sustain that. He is an efficient quarterback, or at least he was 2 years ago. But yeah, last year, for a young quarterback to not have an offensive coordinator, he looked lost out there. And he did. He looked like it was like the plays were called like, you're going to throw this route and you're not going to evaluate the rest of the field. And so I think it's going to be again, this is a team that's purely based off having an offensive coordinator and a coach. This offense will be better.
Well, you look at the track record for Bill O'Brien from 2007 to 2011, in the meat of that Patriots championship runs, he was not the offensive coordinator the whole time, but we're talking about offensive assistant, wide receivers coach, quarterbacks coach for 2 years, and then an offensive coordinator the year the Giants beat him in 2011. And then he moved over to Penn State, and then he came out of Penn State to go coach Houston for a big chunk of time. And then the past 2 years he's been in Alabama under Nick Saban. So I think as the offensive coordinator. So he's ready to go back into that role again. And I think he wasn't just an offensive coordinator, he was a quarterbacks coach. So he had Bryce Young as well there. So I think looking at the whole, I think it's going to be a good person for Mac Jones to be under. He's going to be working close with Mac Jones. And everybody forgets Mac Jones did throw for 3,800 yards his rookie season. You know, last year he didn't play all the games. Zappy came in for a couple games. But you saw the success Zappy had. It wasn't because he's a better quarterback, I don't think. It's straight because he went out and he was playing backyard football versus Mac Jones was not used to that prior to. And Mac Jones is not built for that. Mac Jones is built like Tom Brady's built a little bit better, where he's not going to go play backyard football. He's going to know, he's going to be told what plays to make. He's going to make the play. He's going to make his reads. He's going to move on. Versus last year, I think it was such a jumbled mess in the play calling that the reason Zappy did it was because he was playing more backyard football. We know Mac Jones is not fast. We know he's not a mobile quarterback. He's not making the plays Kyler makes or the plays, Russell Wilson used to make or any of the young bucks Lamar Jackson can do. So at the end of the day, a little more structure is going to help this offense, and it's going to help it move a little bit better. It's going to be a cog in the wheel that's going to be moving every single one of them together versus not moving efficiently, not doing the same thing and leaning on Ramondre Stevenson, which doesn't hurt Ramondre Stevenson. It only can help him because he's going to open up the run game a little bit better. I agree with the Juju Smith-Schuster.
He's an effective receiver out of the backfield as well, so it can only help him there.
I agree with Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, we'll see what happens. He's still not cleared and practicing after the offseason injury, their surgery in the offseason. But that being said, he's more of a possession receiver. He's great over the middle with slants. I think you could see him being very efficient with that and creating some mismatches on some linebackers. I don't think Devontae Parker is going to be worth me getting in any of my leagues. Maybe a late round pick. The only reason I like him is maybe in the red zone to be a red zone threat, but I'd rather take my chances with Gesicki in that. The thing about Devontae Parker, he's never been good at getting separation. He's one of the worst, if not the worst ranked in the league year after year, especially for the past couple of years. And because of that, if you're not creating separation, you're not going to get the eye of the quarterback throwing your way. And unless you are 100% on a 50-50 ball, it's going to be hard to want to trust and throw to that guy. Now, he's a big body. He's athletic. Obviously, he was drafted high in the draft by the Dolphins, but he still has never been somebody look at Kenny Golladay. He goes to the Giants, and he has an awful time because he can't create separation. And you get young quarterbacks that, aren't going to know how to throw a guy open as well. So to me, I'd stick with maybe Juju. I'd like to see what Tyquan Thornton's going to do. I'd like to see if Kayshon Boutte is going to make the team, and if he does, I think he's going to be an emerging talent late in the season. I even said he can maybe be the steal of the draft in terms of rookies because people are going to sleep on him. But 2 years ago, the guy was the best receiver in college football. So let's just, we're not putting the gas on this team, but I think this team is going to be seeing an improvement in the offense overall.
Yeah,
they have to.
I'll agree with you too. It's like, because of the two receiving threats at tight end, I think we'll see a lot more two tight end sets, and very similar to the offense that they ran when they had Gronk and he who shall not be named.
Yes.
He's had multiple documentaries made about him. But having those two guys, they'll be able to split them both out. And both those guys spend a lot of time lining up in the slot or out wide, not on the traditional line as a tight end was. And I think even with like Jonah Smith, when he was there for the last couple seasons, I think we thought there was going to be that. But Jonah Smith spent a big majority of his time in the Patriots lined up right next to the tackle in that traditional tight end spot. And when you have two guys like Gesicki and Hunter Henry that can run every route and catch the ball very well, they might use him there because of the lack of talent at the wide receiver position. And they really, I don't understand. I really don't understand why they signed Devontae Parker to a 3-year deal.
Well, that just makes me think it's I don't remember the guarantee is not a lot or something like that. I remember looking at
It's a $33 million deal over
yeah, it
3
is.
years. So.
It is. But part of me makes me think that they had to lock him up. They locked somebody up. Obviously, there's the race for DeAndre Hopkins, and I know they're one of the teams that are in there. Maybe it's just a sign that it's like, hey, we're probably not going to get him, or we're not going to pay him the money he wants. Let's get a guy that's going to be low cost to us in the long term. Like, yeah, it's a $33 million deal, but when you break it down, I don't think it's a ton guaranteed money. It's a lot of incentive based. I don't have the stats on me if you want to look it up, but to me, I think that may be a little bit more. But then again, who knows? Maybe it's also a sign that Juju is not going to be healthy. And Juju may be somebody that, is the odd man out if he can't come back healthy and play they want him to play. Maybe it's insurance for that. So either way, I think this offense is going to be better. Just pure, simple fact that their offensive coordinator changed. So moving on to another team that I think the offensive coordinator moves the needle. And they also, difference from them and the Patriots, got better because they gained another receiver too on top of this. And that's the LA Chargers. I think this team here is a team was supposed to be amazing last year. It was supposed to be one of the top scoring offensive last year when you've got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, you've got Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert coming off of a great sophomore year campaign, about to make a third year leap. And they dudded out in terms of points scored. The offensive play calling last season was abysmal. They would get up on these teams with great play calling and good rhythm, and all of a sudden they would just coast themselves to a loss. And part of it was they didn't want to neutral. They didn't want to take the deep shots down the field. They didn't want to use Herbert's arm until desperation times. And yeah, Herbert was hurt for a little bit, but that man played through pain and he was still successful. The hardest part for me to watch was you had some of the best receivers out there, and I'm talking about when they were out there. I know Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were on and off the field all season, but when those guys were out there, they still weren't using them to their advantage. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the season, something started to click a little bit, and it started looking a little bit better. You get some big sideline catches to Mike Williams. You get some big first down receptions on third and long to Keenan Allen, the stuff they know how to do. And now you add Quentin Johnston, who's a menace, like a big body, fast, good receiver that's going to open up for the other two, that you can go run 3 wide receiver sets and be scary. You have a good receiving tight end in Everett, who I think, because they didn't add anybody else, Donald Parham is a good red zone and end zone threat, but Everett's the athlete, and he has great yards after the catch. He proved that last year, finishing top 15 for tight ends. And you've got Eckler returning, and an offensive line that has improved. There's no reason why Justin Herbert should throw under 35 touchdowns this year. In fact, I've said it and I'll say it again. My big prediction of the year is Herbert is going to be the league's MVP. He's going to throw for 5,000 yards, if not a hair under, and he's going to throw for 40 touchdowns, because there's nothing that's going to stop him from doing it, especially when Austin Eckler can have 10 touchdowns out the backfield himself. So I just don't see this team being worse than last year. Now that they've got Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator, I can only see it being better because, we've seen Dak have successful season with Kellen Moore, and also Kellen Moore loves people out the back, running backs out the backfield. He loves spreading to different receivers and loves his tight ends. So to me, Everett's a sneaky little pick to make because of that, and I think you can't go wrong with any of those receivers, especially taking a late draft flyer on Quentin Johnston.
I'll say this about Donald Parham is the whole reason Everett kind of emerged last season as an every down tight end is because Parham was injured last season. I actually think Parham's a really talented guy, and he is a big body there, and I think we're going to see a lot more of him this year. But yeah, you kind of hit every point. Like Kellen Moore can, his offense can sustain top end guys. Dak had great seasons underneath him. And I think Herbert's better than Dak, and I think the weapons around them are better than what Dak had and better what Kellen Moore had in Dallas. You add a guy like Quentin Johnston, and let's just say that the last couple of years it's been a real struggle for the Chargers to stay healthy at the wide receiver position, and it's really hurt them in a lot of games because they haven't had the production from Keenan Allen like we're used to. We haven't had the production of Mike Williams because he's been hurt over the last 2 seasons.
Well, I think Mike Williams has been the biggest issue there. Yeah.
Yeah, but you go and draft a guy like Quentin Johnston, and he can come in, and if one of those guys gets hurt, you're not missing a beat. He's that talented, and again, he's in a situation where he doesn't need to come in and be the guy right away because you have 2 guys that are really, really talented in front of him. So you put him into a number 3 role, and if anything happens, and they still have other guys there as well, that are, and add that on top of Eckler, who, like we've talked about, is arguably the best receiving running back in football in terms of production. I think McCaffrey's a better receiver, but in terms of what he does on the field year in and year out, he has been the best receiving running back in the NFL. And yeah, you're right. Like the ceiling for Herbert and this offense is number 1 offense and MVP from Herbert. Now the floor is, I think the floor is still relatively high.
It's higher than last year. And we're talking about Herbert throwing for 4,725 touchdowns. It's got to be higher than that.
Yeah, too. Yeah. I mean, we've seen Herbert with the yardage year in and year out. Like he's getting better and better. The offense is high powered. The touchdowns were down last year, and that's because they put the car in neutral. In a lot of the games that they got up 2 or 3 scores, they put the car neutral and slow played the game. And I think that was their downfall. Is definitely their downfall in the playoff game when they lost, because they just thought that they can coast.
Yeah.
And this defense is. It's when Bosa's healthy, this defense is really good.
That's the thing, is he was out for the season after that groin. I think it was a groin injury when he tear it or something like that. And then you bring in Khalil Mack, and you've got Derwin James, who's one of the best, I think, in the league at his position, and you've got good cornerbacks. I agree with you. The defense is better than it should be. And last year, the defense were on their heels because the offense couldn't keep point scoring, couldn't keep them on the field. So I mean, real quick, talk about the offense here. Keenan Allen only played 10 games last year, and those weren't 10 full games. But before that, I mean, 16, 14, 16, 16, 16. He had that issue where it was either, I can't remember if it was 2016 or 2015 when he lacerated his spleen. It was one of those, but he missed the entire season because of that. And then I looked at Mike Williams, and surprisingly enough, the problem with Williams is he'll dress for games and then go out there and run like maybe 30% of the routes. And that's what scares me with him, because he did play 13 games last year, 16 the year before, 15, 15, 16. So he missed games. But that being said, when he played 16 games 2 years ago in 2021, he was standard scoring wide receiver number 9. But again, the thing that he does that Keenan Allen either dresses and doesn't go, or he dresses and go, or he doesn't dress and doesn't go, or he dresses and goes. Mike Williams was always dressing, and it was like game time decision on Mike Williams, or he'll go out and run 2 routes and then he's done. And you bring in Quentin Johnston, which kind of allows them, because when you only have your top 2 wide receivers for 6 total games last year together, 6 full total games, I see why Herbert struggled at times, but he didn't struggle that much. He threw for 4,700 yards. So there were capable people. It was scoring points and putting pressure on defenses that they couldn't do. And I think it was offensive play calling that was their crutch last year. And this year, they have no crutches. They've got a good offensive coordinator that proved himself in Dallas, and I think he's going to awaken a team who's going to push to try and overtake the Chargers in that division. It's going to be difficult, but they're going to push for it. The Chiefs in that division. So, I mean, who would be your favorite person to draft off this team?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, besides Eckler?
Besides, obviously Eckler, but unless you're 1-1 overall, you can't guarantee that you're going to get Eckler. No. So take Eckler out of the equation. Who would be your favorite guy to draft, and when would you try and take him?
I really like Quentin Johnston in terms of value. I think he's going to come on later in the season, and I think because of the just injuries that they've sustained at the receiver position, he's going to get a lot more love. But I do like having Keenan Allen if I can get my hands on him. I think he's a great wide receiver to get in kind of if you're going top 2 rounds at running back and stacking up top at running back, then he's a great receiver you can get in the third and late 3rd round that can be a number 1 for you. I mean, he's proven it year in, year out that he can be a 1,000-yard receiver. He could be an 8+ touchdown guy. He's just high volume, but there's really not a lot of guys I would say like I don't like. This is one of the offenses that we've talked about that like I want a piece of. So if I don't get Keenan Allen and if I don't get Mike Williams, then I can go get Quentin Johnson. If I miss out on all three of those, I can get Gerald Everett. You know, Herbert's a guy. A quarterback, my personal draft strategy, I'm a little bit weird. If I don't get one of my top three guys, I'm usually going to wait on quarterback. I'm probably not looking to get Herbert. And if I am getting Herbert, I'm definitely drafting someone else. But I think his value is where I would be drafting wide receivers or a third running back. But yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at people that want to go and draft him in the top 4 or 5 rounds. Like he's going to be one of those top 5 quarterbacks in the league. It's just not someone I'm looking to draft. I'm either going really early with quarterback or I'm going to wait.
I was on Herbert last year. I thought last year he could have had an MVP season because his numbers kept going up, and there was no way he wasn't going to throw for over 40 touchdowns and close to 5,000 yards. He did one of the two. If you just look at Pat Mahomes' numbers being over 5,000 and 41 touchdowns, that is an achievable number for the offense he's throwing to. And that's what I like about it. And I think we may see an offense that is going to be firing on a little bit more all cylinders, because I think as long as they're healthy, you're going to have weapons no matter where, and there's going to be a mismatch somewhere on the field. And I think Herbert's been on the field long enough to be able to find those weaknesses in the defense. To me, I love Keenan Allen. I'll draft him year after year. I know he's getting up there in age, but if you can get him in the early 4th round, because right now he's ADP 39, which is early 4th round. That's the value I'd get him. Anybody who's taken him in the 3rd round, it's too early for me. I feel like there's some higher ceiling guys there that I'd rather take. But that being said, with my bold take on Herbert, if I can get Herbert in the 4th round, I'd rather take Herbert than Allen in the 4th round, just because of that position, locking up that quarterback. He's probably the last quarterback that I'm going to be taking that early out of the top guys. Because even I'm the same with you. I'd rather just wait and go grab somebody else, if not going earlier. Now, Everett I like. Again, he's part of that big squad that's lumped together down towards the bottom in the later rounds that you can take and try and get value on and hope you hit. Again, I don't think I could trust him to be my every weekend tight end. Last year I didn't. It was him and Njoku for me, back and forth based on matchups. But I'm going to agree with you in this one. Quentin Johnson is my favorite value pick in this one, because I think there is a pathway for him to overtake Mike Williams in his own role. And I have a feeling he's going to have scheme roles, and by the end of the season, you're going to see somebody that may end up helping you win a championship, because there's just no way Mike Williams is staying on the field the whole time.
Well, you get him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex guy, and bench spot, and late season he could end up being, a top. I'm not saying over the course of the entire season, but in the second half of the season, he could end up being a top 20 receiver.
Yeah.
Because he might be one of those younger receivers that it might take an injury for him to really get a lot of volume. It might take an injury for him to get involved in the offense. Whereas like some of these other guys, even like look at the last 3 seasons, right? You have Justin Jefferson 3 seasons ago, Amon-Ra last year, and then Christian Watson last year. Or Amon-Ra 2 years ago, and then Christian Watson last year. And all 3 of those guys really didn't emerge until week 8, where they actually started becoming what they are now. Minus Christian Watson, because he had like a 4-game span where he went absolutely nuts and then kind of disappeared again. And he's been on kind of my guys where I'm just like pump my brakes on. But nevertheless, another video. And Quentin Johnson, I think, is on that kind of same path where I don't think in the first 8 weeks of the season, if Allen and Mike Williams are healthy, he's really not going to have like a full role. But I think come, week 9, 10, 11, we're going to start seeing him emerge as being a dude in this league. And if you can get a dude in this league at round 9 or 10, like you might win the league.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing too. If I'm saying that Justin Herbert's going to throw for 5,000 yards, I fully expect Keenan Allen to have over 1,000 and a healthy season. I fully expect Mike Williams to be teetering at that 1,000 mark too as well. I expect Austin Eckler to be anywhere between the 700 and 1,000 mark. So say he hits 1,000. That's only 3,000 or 5,000 yards. You're talking about 2,000 yards that are going to be given up around to the rest of the players. There is a very good chance that second half of the season, let's say maybe the last 6 weeks of the season, Quentin Johnston has 500-600 yards in those last 5-6 weeks for him, which end up being your playoff time. So you break down the stats for that there. Those 2,000 yards are going to go to somebody. I don't expect the tight end to be a 1,000-yard receiver. So I like Quentin Johnston. I like all the receivers here. And obviously you got to draft like people are healthy. So to me, the Chargers are one of those teams that I am going for in the draft. If they're there for me, they're a team that I'm going to take at ADP and not try and wait for value, because if they're there, they're worth it. But I also know that I'm not going to jump ahead and get one because there's multiple pieces there that I'm willing to take too. I
mean, even last year, like when those guys went down, like Josh Palmer stepped in, Jalen Guyton stepped in. Both those guys are still there. Like this is probably the best full wide receiver core. Maybe the Cincinnati's better as like an overall receiving core, but these guys are another top 5. Same with the Browns. That they're a top 5 receiving core in terms of top down depth.
I mean, listen, if Josh Palmer can have almost 800 yards, I think Quentin Johnston can have easily that.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's enough for the Chargers. Let's move on to. We got 2 other teams here, and we have a couple honorable mentions.
Turn the lights out. That's enough for the Chargers.
Yeah. Listen, we're blowing a lot of smoke up their ass here, and listen, they better push forward. Herbert, if you're listening, take it. He's probably not. He'll probably never listen to us, but
no,
hey,
that's okay.
Hey, we can hope.
We can hope.
Let's talk about these 2 other teams on our list before we move on to a couple honorable mentions. But Houston Texans are an offense that last year had some shining moments, some games where they surprised people. But to me, that offense last year was terrible. That offense couldn't find an identity except for Dameon Pierce, which was just little shining lights of Marshawn Lynch-esque type of runs. But besides that, there was no spark in that offense. There was no electricity in that offense. And it was their defense that was keeping them in games, and it wasn't even that good. But you had good cornerbacks making people in the division who also weren't good, some tough opponents. So to me, when you add a quarterback, and there's a caveat with this, but when you add a rookie quarterback, you have another wide receiver who's playing his first full season there. You got a veteran wide receiver that's there. You've got a running back coming into his sophomore year, plus a veteran behind him as well that you sign. All those pieces coming together give you a better opportunity for success than where we were, especially a high drafted quarterback like CJ Stroud. I think this team is going to be better than they were last year. They have divisional opponents that are going to make it a little bit easier on them than it would be in some other divisions, for sure. CJ Stroud's a talented quarterback. I think he's going to be one of the more successful. I still think, to me, like I said in our roundtable, I think Bryce Young is going to have the best rookie season, but CJ Stroud's going to be right there. You have John Metchie coming in, who is a sleeper. Do not sleep on Metchie, people. Sleeper pick. Wait till you see this guy play. You have Nico Collins, a solid veteran wide receiver.
I think any of these receivers can be labeled as a sleeper, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, just because I think they're
based on their ADP right now, where they're going, like all these guys can be listed as sleepers.
Well, I'm just saying, I think people aren't even talking about Metchie. People are not even looking at him either.
Part of the argument is that like there's so many like unknowns here, but they're really talented players on this team. And listen, I'll throw some stats out to you. In terms of overall rankings, their passing offense was ranked higher than their rushing offense last year. And it's the only ranking that they're not 31st in the league.
Well, because there was only one running back. There was literally one guy there to run the ball.
Yeah. Rex Burke had fronted the load when Dameon Pierce went down. So they were 25th in terms of passing. They were 31st in total yards per game. They were 31st in rushing yards per game. They were 31st in points per game. Gentlemen and ladies, if any ladies are watching too, listen, guys. There's only one way to go.
Yes.
And that's up. All right. this team is a heck of a lot better than it was last year. They're way more talented at the receiver position. They got a legit tight end that's very talented as a pass catcher to help out a rookie quarterback. They have a rookie quarterback that is a top tier talent. You know, they had Davis Mills, and he was, giraffe neck Mills, that was not going to be a top tier talent in this league. But Singletary coming off his injury last year, now them adding Devin Singletary, like there's a lot of talent on this team. And it's like these unsung heroes, and it's kind of island of misfit toys almost. And I think that their defense got better too. And again, in a winnable division with not a lot of teams with great defenses on it. So I think this is probably going to be my most improved team. Like you can say ceiling for this is, top, maybe top 10 offense, not top 5, but top 10 offense. But their floor is going to be much higher than 31st.
I'd say their ceiling is top 15,
15?
I'd say top 14, 15 is their ceiling. I see them being that 16, 17, 18 rounds, which again is a major improvement.
Yeah. I mean, it's a significant improvement. Again, I think Nico Collins is a very underrated receiver. If he wasn't on Houston last year, I mean, if people are just looking at his numbers from last year, they're not going to jump off the charts at you. But if you look at the kind of receiver that he is, and the games that he was healthy, he is very, very, very talented.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a mismatch nightmare for a lot of people. You add Tank Dell to this team. You add John Metchie to this team. I mean, again, we've talked about it. Robert Woods is kind of the odd man out. He's the most veteran receiver on this team, and he's the odd man out in kind of our talks about this team.
Well, we've seen him fade in 2 offensive,
right,
back-to-back years. So
what I love about this team, and even let's say in terms of a fantasy perspective, Dameon Pierce is the highest ranked player on this team, highest ranked ADP on this team offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still only going in the 6th round. Like, that's nuts. It's like anyone on this team, like this offense is going to be much more improved than it was last year. And this team has to score points. So I've seen Treylon Burks going much higher than Nico Collins. I've seen Treylon Burks and receivers on and Chig, the tight end for Tennessee, going much higher than Dalton Schultz. Like, why? I want someone to explain to me why. Because when you look at this, the Tennessee's offense versus this offense, it's young, it's talented, they have speed. The defense is going to be better. At least with the rookie team, like they might not win a lot of games. They might win only 7 games. And that's kind of my max win total for them. I'd be shocked if they had any more than that. But they're going to be in a lot of these games. They're a young, hungry team that's looking to make a splash this year. And I think that's going to reflect in terms of fantasy production.
Yeah, I like the offense here. I think they're going to improve. I don't see that. Like I said, their ceiling is offense 15. I think we're going to be closer towards the 20 range on that side of the teens, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a bad offense. Doesn't mean you're not going to have an opportunity for a 1,000-yard receiver or anything like that. We're not looking for a Rookie of the Year campaign out of C.J. Stroud for this team to be successful either. So, and again, you don't need them to win games. In fact, for fantasy purpose wise, this may be a better offense where they're playing from behind a lot, where you get some more passing opportunities, because then you're going to get more receiving options. Like last year, the reason they were better in their passing than their rushing was because they were behind every single game. So
in the first quarter of every single game.
Exactly. So I love Dameon Pierce here. I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Singletary does take a little chip into his volume. How much, we don't know. I mean, you could suspect, say, maybe a 70-30 share or 60-40 share. If it gets closer towards that 50-50, it's not going to be – I think 6th round is a good spot to pick him up, and I would have Singletary right behind him in the 6th or 7th round. But that being said, I'm not shying away from anybody on the team, to be honest with you.
My favorite rookie wide receiver is Tank Dell. And he's going to – you're going to see JSN go ahead of him. You're going to see Addison go ahead of him. Zay Flowers. You're going to see all these guys come off the board, and Tank Dell's going to be sitting there. And I think he's going to be – in terms of my favorite – for value, where you're going to be able to get him, you can get him in the 12th or 13th round. No one's going to be drafting them. You can get him in probably later. You probably
really get him off waivers, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, people do like rookie names, but yeah.
Yeah, like legitimately, like you're going to be able to get him really late in the draft, and or pick him up in free agency. But if you're in a keeper league or a dynasty league, this is a guy you can target later, and he's going to be an absolute steal for you.
I mean, that's how I feel about John Metchie. I mean, to me, he is a more all-around solid wide receiver, and he proved it in Alabama. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it last year when we should have. But I think him coming off of, being cancer-free and coming off of all his, another whole year removed from an ACL tear, he gets to skip that first, hey, let me get that 1 year under my belt looking sluggish with an ACL tear as a receiver, to right into the game. And I think he's going to come out the gates and prove that he is up there with all those Alabama receivers, like everybody is year after year. Your Amari Coopers, your Julio Jones. So, yeah. So
Alabama receivers.
Hey, they are premier for a reason. Ohio State, Alabama, they bring up some good receivers to the NFL. And I think people are 100% sleeping on him, and he's not going to get drafted in a lot of leagues. So keep an eye out for them. Keep an eye out for him. Let us know your thoughts on Houston too as well, because I think a lot of people are probably going to think we're crazy, but we're not talking about our top 5 most improved teams. We're talking about just 5 offenses that we see improved, that we are going to try and draft a piece from somewhere, because there's going to be value.
Even if we were, I'm putting them in my top 5 most improved offenses. Like, again, I started out by saying, like, they were 31st.
Yeah,
pretty much in every category in the league. There's only one way to go. And so, like, if you're talking improvement, even if they finish at 20, they're jumping up 11 spots, right?
Yeah.
So, like, they're going to be a top improved offense. So if we expect them to make that jump, which, you can go across the fantasy football network and you're looking at Houston players all over the place. And people are saying, oh, target this guy. So everyone's on this trend. Like, everyone thinks that Houston is going to be an improved team, because we've seen teams that are this young and this hungry come in and make a splash. We saw it last year with the Jets. We've seen these types of players just come in. They might not be in terms of win total, but the offenses take a huge jump. And I think CJ Stroud is much more talented than a lot of the other quarterbacks that are coming in. Like, again, I've seen all this hype on Anthony Richardson because of his rush ability, but CJ Stroud can run the football and he can throw the football, and they have weapons around him. Mm-hmm. And he's not as much of a raw talent coming into the NFL that someone like Anthony Richardson is. And we've seen Anthony Richardson being drafted as, a top 10 quarterback, which is just absurd.
Well, let's do a little this or that before we move on to our honorable mentions and our last team.
Let's play this or that.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this. So let's talk about Colts. Let's talk about Houston. In terms of wide receiver ones, you taking Pittman or you taking Collins?
In terms of value?
Yes. In terms of draft, where they're going ADP wise, or for fantasy.
To be honest with you, I'm staying away from Pittman. He's he's not my avoid. He's my caution. So if I'd rather take Collins, because I can get someone else instead of Pittman at that position, and then wait, 5 more rounds and get Collins for essentially free. But I'd rather have Nico Collins.
Do you think their stats end up closer to each other than people think are at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think they're going to be maybe a couple hundred, maybe 100 or 200 yards away from each other, and touchdowns might be similar.
You taking? Are you going to take Jonathan Taylor at value, or are you going to go for Dameon Pierce?
I
would say at value where ADP is.
I'd rather have Dameon Pierce
and go for somebody else in the first round.
ADP.
Because right now, standard scoring, you got Jonathan Taylor in the first round.
Well, you looked at our running back rankings. He's not even in our top 5.
Yeah,
and he's being drafted as a top. Same thing with like Bijan's up there, right? And Bijan, Jonathan Taylor. Like, I'd rather have Chubb and Henry over both of them.
And you're drafting Dalton Schultz over any of those tight ends?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. How about just real quick here? Are you going with Carolina receiving core versus Houston receiving core?
See, that's because the value is very similar, right?
Like, it is.
Mingo's another guy. There's a lot of the guys on both these teams that are being undrafted. Like, Terrence Marshall's being undrafted. Jonathan Mingo is being like late in the draft. Thielen's going later. Like, Thielen's probably higher ranked than Nico Collins. Yeah, I like Nico Collins. I like Houston. I like Houston receivers better than I
Well,
like Carolina.
only reason I bring that up is like if they're going to be the number 20th ranked, say they go all the way up to 20, people are going to have to be behind them.
Yeah.
In terms of rankings. So I'm just thinking about, to me, Carolina and the Colts are two teams I could easily see having worse production offensively behind them. Even though I think Bryce Young's going to have a better year, it doesn't mean overall they're going to be a better offense. But I just bring that up. Let's talk about two honorable mentions. I'll let you chat about yours because I know it's close to home and true to the heart. But we got New York Jets. If you want to say something quick about their honorable mention and why it's obvious that they're going to be an improved team.
Yeah, it's easy. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like they were terrible last year in terms of scoring efficiency and passing. And you add a Hall of Famer where Aaron Rodgers in a healthy season has not thrown for under 3,500 yards. That's double the production, almost double the production than what we got from Zach Wilson last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if Garrett Wilson was able to have 1,000-yard season with Joe Flacco and Mike White and Zach Wilson throwing the football, Aaron Rodgers is going to sustain him over that. And Breece Hall's coming back healthy. I'm not. Let's say I don't care if Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins goes to this team. If they don't go to this team, I still like this team as an improved offense. You add Nathaniel Hackett, who's comfortable with Aaron Rodgers. You have two pass catching tight ends. This wide receiver core has a lot of talent on it. This is a team I obviously I'm a Jets fan, but offensively they're going to improve. They were the bottom 5 teams in terms of passing and scoring. They're going to improve on this. This defense is really good too. So you're not going to have 3 and outs from Zach Wilson last year to put this defense back on the field. This defense is going to turn the ball over for you, and then this team can actually go down the field and score.
Yeah. Listen, we don't need to sit here and tell everybody of Aaron Rodgers to a team that was a quarterback away from being a thorn in any AFC team's playoff side is going to be moving the needle on our
away from being a playoff team last year.
So, second one is the LA Rams. LA Rams obviously last year were the least improved team, and if you can have the exact opposite of most improved was them, because it all came down to injuries. Let's be honest here. I know they struggled early on in the season, coming off a Super Bowl and stuff, but when this year coming back into it, they're no different than the start of last year. You're going to have a capable Matt Stafford. You're going to have a top 5 wide receiver in Cooper Kupp. You have Cam Akers, who proved himself to be a 3-down back at the end of the season. He's coming to the season hot that way too as well. You put people around Matt Stafford. The offensive line took a hit after their Super Bowl year, and their defense took a little bit of a hit, but let's just offensive wise, improving offenses is what we're talking about. And they're going to be improved from last year based on just the fact that you're going to have a healthy offense, plain and simple. So
if Houston was 31st, this was the 32nd team.
So, but those are our honorable mentions. Let's talk about our last team on this list. And this last team to me is the one that has the biggest chance to bust in this improvement list of ours. And that's because it's the Denver Broncos. They're not adding an offensive core. Well, they kind of have an offensive mind, but they didn't do anything massively to improve their team. In fact, their top running back is coming off a massive double ligament injury. So when you look at it, Russell Wilson, everything needs to hit on all cylinders for him. He needs to have a rapport with his wide receivers. Cortland Sutton needs to find separation and learn how to catch the ball better. Jerry Jeudy needs to be what he was expected to be when he was drafted. And all the other players around them are, Greg Dulcich, everybody's, big tight end that everybody wants to get this season, off season. He's going to be a factor, but it comes down to it. Can Sean Payton do what he did in New Orleans in Denver? And I have faith in him. I think he's a fantastic coach. I think he gets a lot of buy-in from his players. And I think Russell Wilson is mature enough to take the chip on his shoulder from last year and come into the season not playing angry and not playing like he kind of did last year coming away from Seattle, but more or less just playing the game of football like he knows how to do. I think last year he tried to come in and prove something, And I think it hurt him. It hurt the team. And as soon as Javonte Williams was hurt, that team was doomed. So Samaje Perine added to the team, I think, is going to be a great option as well, because now you don't have to put it all on Javonte Williams coming off an injury. You got a capable running back that proved himself when Joe Mixon was out in Cincinnati. Again, though, you're changing a head coach. And to me, head coaching changes are much more variable than when you change a coordinator position. That's the scary part. You can hit or you can miss on a head coach. Offensive coordinators, it's quick and easy to dump them, and they go through a cycle, but you don't hit or miss that much because you usually have a coach that steps in. So
I'll say this with Sean Payton is that he's a player's coach, and I think one of the struggles that they had last year with Nathaniel Hackett being the head coach there is, Russell Wilson had to be like the locker room guy. I think Payton's going to kind of take a lot of that off of Russell Wilson.
He already did. He already did.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you look at what they really didn't make a ton of additions. They had brought in they drafted Marvin Mims, who is going to be a really talented player in this league. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think he's going to be really talented there. Jerry Jeudy, if he could stay healthy, is going to be a breakout player this year for me at least. Cortland Sutton is Cortland Sutton. Dolchik is Dolchik.
Tim Patrick, don't forget, he's still there. He's coming back off injury.
They have a lot of talent on this team, and they just underperformed last year. And that was due to Russell Wilson's play. So if Sean Payton can kind of get the play calling to where it's a little bit more Russell Wilson friendly, these receivers are, and we both thought that, and when he moved to Denver last year, I'm like, this is a good move for him, because you're trading DK and Tyler Lockett for Sutton and Jeudy. So there's not this huge drop off there. And at the time, you can make an argument that the running back situation was better with Javonte. The defense was a heck of a lot better at the time, and still is. This defense should be at the top 5 scoring. Not scoring defense, but in terms of points allowed, they're going to be up there. They averaged 19 points per game last year defensively. But the offense was atrocious. So
the defense kept them away from the first pick in the draft, pretty much.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. But they get Sean Payton, who is kind of this offensive guru, and I think can set Russ right. But you're right; it is the most variable to it. Like because you add a head coach, offensive coordinator, that doesn't necessarily mean that the team's going to all of a sudden be better when you had questionable quarterback play last year. Now, we'll say, like, the quarterback play last year was the anomaly of his career. We haven't seen that from Russell Wilson before, so maybe as a move to a new state, a much different culture from where
high altitude.
High altitude.
High altitude.
No, Sierra doesn't let him do that. But yeah, this is a lot of variability to this team. I think this is my most questionable jump, but we do think that there's going to be an improvement just based on talent.
Yeah.
And Russell Wilson is still talented. These receivers are still talented, and they didn't make a lot of additions, but last year they were just that bad. Where even if they returned to, again, I use this marker a lot, but even if they were 80% of what we thought that these guys are talented for, or where their bar is, it's going to be much improved than it was last year. And my concern with Javonte Williams is not, I think he's going to be back a lot earlier in the season than people think. I don't think he's going to be shouldering a huge workload, but if you go back and look at the last, his career so far, there's only been maybe 2 or 3 games where he had over 15 carries. So I don't think that they need to bring him back and need to have him shoulder the workload. It's a reason they signed Samaje Perine. It's a reason they brought another veteran, a veteran guy in there to be able to shoulder a lot of that work. And so even if it's only the first 2 weeks of the season, 3 weeks of the season where they're starting to get Javonte's legs under him and he only gets 10 carries a game, I think we can see by week 4 that he starts to get back to his 15, 16 carries a game. And that's right in the norm of what we've seen from him so far. We've seen how efficient he was with only 15 carries. So, I'm not too worried about him. So again, if he's back and he's healthy and the rushing offense is much better than it was last year, then I think it enables a lot more things to be opened up downfield for Russ, which, again, it should lead to improved numbers from Judy, from Sutton, from Patrick, and Marvin Mims is another guy, probably second half of the season for this rookie receiver.
Yeah. I think, again, this team should be what I expect out of this team this year is what they should have been last year. And it's purely on this coaching decision. I think they were last in scoring in terms of offenses last year. They had some bad games. I think they had a couple games where they scored 0 touchdowns. So I think when you look at this team as a whole, they're going to get in the end zone. They're going to be finding ways to be successful. And I think Sean Payton's going to settle for nothing less than at least making a run at being the number 2 team in this conference. I think they're going to give some of these other teams a run for their money. I mean, listen, we've seen veteran quarterbacks move to another team and struggle. We've seen veteran quarterbacks move to another team and win a Super Bowl. We can almost script which ones we're going to do what. I mean, I don't think anybody's expected Matt Ryan to be a top 10 quarterback moving to the Colts last year. But I think when Tom Brady moved to Tampa Bay, I think everybody was expecting a championship. I think when Matt Stafford moved to LA, everybody was like, he's going to have an opportunity for a championship. I'm not saying that's the case here for Russell Wilson, but I'm saying I don't see him being on the Matt Ryan side of this veteran move. Last year, he proved that he was. He was terrible.
Well, there's a trend to that. Those offenses were good before you entered a quarterback here. And this is the whole reason I put the honorable mention as the Jets. Like, those offenses were good minus the quarterback play. Yeah. And then you insert a really good quarterback, and you're going to make a run for it. So you can make the argument. I mean, listen, I'm not calling it. I'm not saying it. But you can make the argument that the Jets are going to the Super Bowl this year. Based on these teams in the past where they brought in an elite veteran quarterback, an aging elite veteran quarterback, to a team that could already sustain an offense. Like the Rams were a little different. They went to the Super Bowl the year prior, or two years prior, with Jared Goff, and then only threw up 3 points. But you look at Tampa's offense, and Jameis Winston was out there throwing 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Like that offense was ready for just insert a decent quarterback. And
yeah, but here's the argument though about the Russell Wilson thing is I think Denver was 19 offense scoring 19th overall in 2021.
Drew Lock.
Yeah, in 2020 they were scoring offense number 19. They were that side of the coin, and to go from being 19, get Russell Wilson, and not jump yourself close to the top 10, instead go all the way to the bottom, that's the weird part to me. Like, yeah, no, I didn't suspect that.
Like I said, like that was the anomaly to his career, where we expected him to be a heck of a lot better. And he's very talented, and we saw glimpses of it last year. And it's just they couldn't protect him. He got sacked more than any other quarterback, or not any other quarterback. Top 5 most hit quarterbacks last year, and I expect that to be better, and I expect that to scheme a little bit better to get the ball out of his hands.
He was sacked 55 times last year for 368 yards.
Yeah,
he had a sack percentage of 10%. Yeah. I mean, he saw that back in Seattle in 2018, but they still were solid back then. But last year 3,500 yards in 15 games. That's not terrible. What was terrible was he only threw 16 touchdown passes and had 11 interceptions. Right. I see that separating more. I see him going above 20, and I see him getting below 10. This season.
We're not calling for a Russ MVP, but we're saying that this offense is going to be a lot better than scoring 16 passing touchdowns.
That's because Sean Payton's going to be the one cooking. So
right. Yeah.
Well, that's the end of our 6 offenses that we see improving. We had a couple honorable mentions here. I would have loved to mention these guys behind me, but again, we have a group of
5 and 2 honorable mentions.
Sorry, it was 5 and 2 honorable mentions. So I think let us know your thoughts on the 5 teams we talked about. If you think we hit it on the head, or if you think that we're missing something, or there's another offense that you think is going to improve even better. Again, these aren't the top 5 that we have. Some of these guys are in our top 5, but we just wanted to try and talk about a couple other teams that not many other people are talking about out there too much, or they're talking about in pieces. Let's talk about them as a whole. we're going to be talking about teams as a whole moving forward. We're actually going to start talking about our divisions and breaking the divisions down and sort of looking at the picture on team-to-team basis and guys that we're talking from each team that we want to see be successful. So keep an eye out for that. Those episodes are going to start dropping soon. Again,
every dog will have their day.
Again, if you like the content, like and subscribe and hit that notification button so you can get all the drops as we let them go on YouTube. Thank you all for listening. Tune in next time.